Welcome to this episode of the Mayoral Podcast, everybody. I am your host, Matt Mayer. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about propaganda. A couple of A-list celebrities come out against the way Democrats have been running some of the major cities in this country. The battle for Speaker of the House is still ongoing as of Monday, October 16th, 2023. And what it means that RFK Jr. has announced himself as an independent candidate for President of the United States for 2024. Before I get into today's content, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. So first topic is propaganda. This post here is from a guy I've talked about a lot, or a couple of times in the past. His name's Ed Krasenstein. He takes pretty left-wing positions on a lot of issues out there. Comes across, or at least in his posts, pretends to be a little bit more moderate. I see him as trolling in a lot of his posts. This one I don't see that way. He's talking about the propaganda that's coming out from the Palestinian side, from the Hamas side, regarding some of the things that have reportedly been happening inside the Gaza Strip. So this video below here is just talking about the Israel-Palestine, and it's talking about how Israel is beheading children. And it's funny because that was the story we talked about in my last episode, where there was unconfirmed reports that was reported from CNN that there had been beheading of Israeli children by Hamas. Now, the other side is claiming that the Israelis are beheading Palestinian children. So again, propaganda on both sides. What's the right thing to believe? What's the wrong thing to believe? I'm not going to be able to discern every single thing for you guys. So if you tuned in to hear from me to tell you what to believe and what not to, I can't make that determination for you. I think you have to take everything and digest it yourself. But where there is propaganda, and here is one of them, this is believed to be a part of the China of China getting in on the propaganda machine and trying to paint Israel as the bad guy in this conflict. And again, just to reiterate the fact that there is propaganda out there. It's going to be coming out for the entirety of this war from both sides. Just be aware of it. Take everything with a grain of salt. You don't have to be the first one to make the determination, but make sure you make the right determination. So don't go out there saying that Israel's beheading children or Hamas is beheading children without first confirming it. Make sure that you get the facts straight before putting these things out there on your social medias or sharing with friends and families. Here's another piece of propaganda. It's kind of funny. Greg Abbott, he's the governor of Texas. It says Texas border wall construction well underway in Maverick County. We won't sit idly by while Biden allows this historic border crisis to escalate. Now, he's been the governor the whole time. This has been over 2.5 years. If he was doing this of his own volition, why didn't he do this 2.5 years ago when Biden first took office? He could have been doing it. This is from the federal government. This is the Biden administration finally reversing course a little bit and building some more of the wall, but he's taking credit for it. Again, there's propaganda on both sides. Be aware of it. If he was really going against the federal government and building the wall, why didn't he build the wall 2.5 years ago? This is the federal government finally doing what they should have been doing and building this wall to prevent this migrant crisis that they created. But they didn't want to do that, so that's why they let all these immigrants in, claiming asylum without any real claim to asylum, but they knew the talking points. You can literally Google it, and they let these people in. So I'm not sticking up for the Biden administration by any stretch of the imagination, but Abbott is not being transparent here. He could have been doing this if he was actually going against the federal government. The federal government is the one that is supposed to be, that has the authority here ultimately to build this wall. If Abbott did and then he didn't build the wall for 2.5 years, he's got a lot of explaining to do, but that's not how it works. The federal government is the one that has the authority. They're the ones who shifted course and allowed Texas to build some more of the wall. So again, be prepared to see propaganda. Know it when you see it. I'm trying to not only point out the propaganda that's happening in the Middle East, but also the propaganda that's happening here at home. And It takes a little bit of time. You're still going to fall for some of it. I'm still going to fall for some of it. But try to do your best to discern what's reality from what's propaganda. And then we go to this. This is Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, talking about the security issue with all the people that are in this country illegally. 2.5 years later, warning that there's potentially a Hamas-style terrorist attack going to happen in this country. And this is a post from Charlie Kirk. He talks about how the FBI and Joe Biden spent 3 years smearing conservatives as America's #1 national security threat. But it's 2A patriots who ended up protecting their schools, malls, synagogues, churches, and other soft targets. If they were actual terrorists, launched the Hamas-style attack the FBI is now warning about. So the FBI is now warning that there is potentially an attack going to happen on U.S. soil, like what happened in Israel, and it's because of the policies they put forth. But Biden and his administration still want to take your guns away. Here's Christopher Wray.
In this heightened environment, there's no question we're seeing an increase in reported threats, and we've got to be on the lookout, especially for lone actors who may take inspiration from recent events to commit violence of their own. So I'd encourage you to stay vigilant, because as the first line of defense, protecting our communities, you're often the first to see the signs that someone may be mobilizing to violence. I'd also ask you to continue sharing any intelligence or observations you may have, and on our end, we're committed to doing the same so that together we can safeguard our communities.
These people are unbelievable. This is the same guy, him and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden, that smeared people that were talking at parent-teacher conferences, speaking up at student council meetings, attending religious events during the pandemic as the biggest threat to America. And they have the gall to come out and say things like this, that now, because of their policies, there's potentially a terror threat, and we are now the ones that are the first lines of defense. Like, give me a break. And propaganda for years, they're still rolling it out. I went a couple episodes ago, talked about how mask mandates were back in certain counties in California for healthcare workers, even though they don't work. I went over the studies. Please make sure that if you have any questions, go back and check out some of those episodes. This here is Kevin Bass. He is a guy that I follow on Twitter. Again, he's a good follow. Kevin, at Kevin N. Bass on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. And this is showing the correlation of mask mandate states versus no mask mandate states from April of 2020 all the way to, what do we got here? January of 2022. Okay? In the orange, that is states with no mask mandate, and then the black is states with mask mandate. So, again, these people are going out there, they've been doing it for years, saying that masks save lives, and this is almost a perfect correlation of the spike between waves of the pandemic, and in here, you see the orange line and the black line following each other perfectly. There's a couple of spots where the orange is a little bit higher. There's a couple of spots where the black is a little bit higher. So you tell me what it really did. You look here, the beginning of it, the black was higher. Orange takes over, black takes over, orange takes over, black takes over, and even like the peak. In the peak of the pandemic, the highest number of cases, the most number of cases per 100,000 were the states with the mask mandates versus the states without the mask mandates. So to me, there's almost no difference between the amount of cases in the states with the mandates and without. There's slight differences during different parts of the pandemic. You can't draw any conclusions other than these lines mirror each other pretty similarly, and there was no need for these mask mandates. But again, they're going to roll them out. Propaganda, I mean, it knows no end, the propaganda that these people are going to roll out there. So here's, and I mentioned at the beginning, there's a couple of A-listers talking out about the the way Democrat cities have been run. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rob Lowe. Now, Rob Lowe is not talking out against it. He's just merely asking the question. And then Arnold answers the question by saying that they seem to want to ruin your city. So here's the quick clip of Arnold and Rob Lowe.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I ask people this all the time, and a good man, served for many, many, many years. He used to have the greatest makes me a Republican, and he had, I think, 4 or 5 things. I think it was, in no particular order, strong military, low taxes, less government, more personal freedoms. There might have been a couple, but it makes sense to know
Strong law enforcement.
and then I'd like to know I always ask Democrats what it means to be a Democrat in that way, and I think whatever anybody would say,
Ruin your cities.
what would they say?
Ruin your cities.
What's that?
Ruin your cities.
Ruin your cities.
That's what the Democrats would say. We're about ruining the cities. We want to fuck up every city in America. That's what it seems to be the theme right now.
Why is that?
I have no idea.
So you see Arnold, growing up in the 80s and 90s, Arnold was the big Hollywood star, the action star. Very disappointed with his "screw your freedom" comment during the pandemic. I think he got caught up in the propaganda. I hope that he's kind of turned the corner, as it seems like he might be here. I know he ran for governor for the state of California as Republican. I hope he's kind of come back to his roots and realized that the government is not the answer. It's often the problem to your issues. So good for Arnold for speaking up. Good for Rob Lowe for asking the question and letting Arnold talk about it on his podcast. Then you have this ongoing speaker battle with the Republicans. Now, a few weeks ago, Matt Gaetz was able to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. They have had a couple of closed-door meetings trying to get a speaker onto the floor. They have not taken an official vote on the floor of the House yet. It seems like there's going to be people from each side of the caucus that are blocking certain members of the House from becoming Speaker. I've said in many of my posts, I don't believe I actually articulated it here on the podcast before, but I believe that the Speaker has to come from outside of the House. I think Lee Zeldin would be a great candidate. He helped tremendously win the House itself by his strong performance in the state of New York. I know he lost the gubernatorial race by, I think it was like 4 or 5 points, but in deep blue New York, he ran a hell of a campaign, and he helped other Republicans in New York get elected. I think that Lee Zeldin, being a former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, not currently being a serving member of the House of Representatives, I think he would be a good candidate to be Speaker of the House. Again, you don't have to be Speaker of the House. You don't have to be a member of the House to become Speaker of the House. You just need to be elected Speaker of the House. Now, he wouldn't get a vote on any of the issues, but he would decide the agenda and what to bring to the floor. So I think Zeldin would be a good answer. It started off in this battle. It seemed like Steve Scalise was going to have the votes. He did beat Jordan on a one-on-one ticket and behind closed doors, but there was enough Republicans that said there's no way I'm voting for Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise has since dropped out. Jordan ran again. He won the vote, but now I believe there's about 50 Republicans as of this morning saying that they're not going to vote for Jordan. So Jordan doesn't seem to have the votes. And here's a post from Benny Johnson calling out some of these Republicans in some of these states and showing where they're from. They're in kind of, most of them are in red states. Georgia is obviously a purple state now. Virginia being a blue state, but kind of turning a little bit more purple with the gubernatorial race of 2021 and Glenn Youngkin winning there. Them kind of winning a couple of big houses, not big houses, big seats in 2021. Not only the governor, but the lieutenant governor. I believe they won a couple other statewide elections that they normally would not have won. So you look at here, and this is just continues to be a struggle to see who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. Republicans really need to get this together. I don't know that Jordan's going to be the answer to the question. I like Jim Jordan. I hope that he is the Speaker of the House. However, I don't know that he's going to have the votes, and Republicans need to figure this out fast. or they're potentially going to hurt themselves. Although I said in a couple of podcasts ago, I don't think that people are going to remember this ultimately. If we get a speaker this week, people aren't going to remember the struggle when it comes to the election of 2024. But that said, they still need to figure this out sooner rather than later. So last topic of the day is RFK changing his party from the Democrat Party to an independent for the 2024 election. Now, who knows ultimately what this is going to lead to? I think there's a lot of people claiming that this is going to help Trump, this is going to hurt Trump, this can help Biden, hurt Biden, whatever it might be. Presumably, Biden and Trump are going to be the candidates. Those seem to be the candidates that are most likely to win the nomination for the Democrats and the Republicans. RFK is a serious contender. He's going to garner a lot of independent votes. There's no doubt about it. But this here is a clip from 2014. It says here he's on camera calling for law to punish climate change skeptics. Remember, there's a lot of people that are conservatives that like RFK. He is better than Joe Biden, but he is radical on some issues, and climate change is definitely one of them. So here's a clip of RFK saying law enforcement should punish climate skeptics back in 2014.
Against all the evidence of the rational mind are saying that global warming doesn't exist, that they are contemptible human beings, and that, I wish that there were a law you could punish them under.
That's potentially the next president of the United States saying, I wish that there was a law that I can punish them under, talking about climate skeptics. Now, I went over in my last episode talking about the Norwegian delegation. I don't know exactly I can't remember exactly what they were. They were some type of Bureau of Statistics or something like that, saying there was nothing statistically relevant to lead to the conclusion that humans have a huge impact on climate change based on CO2 emissions. So again, this ain't the guy. This ain't the guy for conservatives, okay? You might not like Trump, but Trump would be better for conservatives than this guy. Now, he would be better than Biden, admittedly, but not for conservatives. Now, I want to take a look here at the last time we had a true contender for third party. It was Ross Perot in 1992. Now, he ran again in 1996. He garnered much less of the vote. He garnered a much lower percent of the vote than he did in 1992. Still formidable, but I wanted to point this out. Take a look at the percentage of the popular vote. Clinton with 43%, HW with 37.5%, and Ross Perot with nearly 19%. Now, he didn't win any state. You can see the electoral votes and the states that he carried, and he didn't win anything, but it did change the math in a lot of these states, and it led to Bill Clinton becoming president. There's no way to say one way or the other that Clinton definitely would have won over Bush if Perot wasn't in the mix. But what you can say is that it certainly changes the math. And there's no way for anyone to really know what is going to happen in the 2024 election with Kennedy as an independent. Now, there's also another more recognizable Green candidate than in years past, with Cornel West running in the Green Party. Now, I said this in previous videos, and I will continue to harp on this. The Green Party candidate being as left-wing as it is, that helps conservatives for sure. That's like the Libertarian Party candidate being in these swing states, hurting conservatives or hurting the Republican Party. The Green Party candidate certainly hurts the Democrats. That said, the independent kind of throws a wrench in everything. I showed the video just a second ago of what Kennedy thinks of climate deniers, as he calls them, or climate skeptics. And he's not the guy for conservatives, but he's going to factor in this election. Can he win a state? I don't know if he can win a state, but if he can win a state, that potentially changes the math, and I'll show that in a little bit. But you take a look at Clinton and Perot and Bush. Ultimately, obviously, Clinton came out victorious, beating the incumbent George H.W. Bush. You look at the results here. Results by state. And you can kind of see the breakdown of what Perot got, what Bush got, and what Clinton got. And it really threw a wrench in some of these states. You see Georgia, which was very close. You're looking at 43.5% for Clinton and 42.9% for Bush. And Perot gets 13.3%. So who did he take more votes from? I believe it was Bush. I'll show you the Reform Party platform now. Now, politics were different back in 1992 than they are in 2024. But as I will show some of these highlights, you tell me what party you think this sounds like. The Reform Party, or again, in 1992, he was an independent, then changed to the Reform Party, formed his own party called the Reform Party. And you could see their current platform being more, in my opinion, more reflective of the current modern day Republican Party. You see a state like Kentucky, that's shocking to see that state. And again, things were much different in 1992, but there was about a 3% difference between Clinton and Bush, and Ross Perot gets over 13.5%. So a lot of things to kind of break down here with regards to each state and where, potentially there could be a breakdown in the 2024 election because of the independent party. The state of Ohio, 40% for Clinton, 38.3% for Bush, and almost 21% of the vote for Ross Perot. Like these swing states, there could be a lot of votes that are cast for RFK. Look at Pennsylvania. Another state where Perot performed very well, 18% of the vote. You look at the state of Oklahoma, a deep red state. He got 23% of the vote. So again, North Dakota, 23% of the vote. You see where he got most of like his bigger chunks of votes, and they were in states that are now red. So I believe that Perot certainly, I think most people would say this, certainly hurt Bush more than he hurt Clinton. He helped Clinton. Look at Montana, 26% of the vote in Montana for Ross Perot. Again, I apologize, I can't highlight it. If I highlight all this stuff, it'll get all messed up. So, but it's a big chunk in some of these states that were blue. 10% of the vote in Tennessee, that state went blue. West Virginia, almost 16% of the vote, and that state went blue. Wisconsin, 21% of the vote. Wyoming, a red state, 25% of the vote. Like this certainly hurt Bush more than it hurt Clinton. It helped Clinton. You can look at the next election, 1996. Perot was in it again. Bob Dole was the candidate for the Republicans. It was a pretty easy victory for the incumbent Bill Clinton. Again, you see the party of Reform Party. He did not win any electoral votes. He did not win any states. You see the map here. Clinton carried a ton of states. So I'm not going to break that one down. I'm not going to go over the states as much there, but I'm going to go over the 2016 election because I think that is one that should be looked at a little bit closer with regards to what could potentially happen here in the upcoming election in 2024. So obviously you got Trump versus Hillary. Trump carries 30 states and one vote in the state of Maine. Maine and Nebraska are a little bit weird. They have a couple of different. Their state isn't broken down. If you just win the state, you win the vote. Ultimately, in the 2020 election, it didn't matter. Trump won one of the votes in Maine, and Biden won one of the votes in Nebraska. If they won the whole state, those would be counted the same amount. So it still would have been the same. But you look down here and let's look at the results. You do it by state by state result, and you look at like the third party candidates here. The Gary Johnson, he got a decent amount of the vote. If you look at the Green Party candidate here, Jill Stein, she didn't get very much vote. But this is more of a left-wing caucus. So that's what I was saying with Cornel West. He can garner more of that vote. If Kennedy had stayed as a Democrat and lost the primary to Biden, which presumably he would have, that would have been beneficial for Trump. Having West, a more well-known candidate in the Green Party, could be the difference in some of these states. So if you look at some of these states that were blue, how close they were, and then you look at the difference between the Libertarian vote and the Green Party vote, and you say, in 2016 at least, potentially Trump could have won it. Look at the state of Maine. You got 47.8% for Clinton. She wins the state. 44.8% for Trump. So that's 3% difference. But you look at the Libertarian Party got 5%, and the Green Party got less than 2%. So that's a bigger than 3% difference between the Libertarian and the Green Party. And you don't even need the Libertarian Party to go away. You just need the Green Party to siphon off those votes from Maine, and then Trump potentially could have won the state of Maine. Now I know it's a lot of assumption there, but that's what you're looking at with a candidate like Cornel West being in the race. It's helping Trump, but Kennedy is potentially going to hurt Trump. So you continue on here. You look at some of these other states where it was pretty close. You could even Minnesota was very close at 46.4% versus 44.9%. That's less than 2%. And the Libertarian Party candidate got 3.8 versus the 1.2 that the Green Party candidate got. Meaning, again, if the Green Party siphoned off presumably as much from the Democrat as the Libertarian did from the Republican, potentially you got a win in Minnesota. Now, these numbers were a little bit different in 2020. You could see the same thing in New Hampshire. Nevada. There was no Green Party candidate. They weren't even on the ticket in Nevada. Trump loses Nevada by less than 2.5%, and the Libertarian Party candidate got 3.3%. So again, enough to make up that difference. New Hampshire, another one, Trump lost by less than 1%. And you look at the Libertarian got 4.1%, and the Green Party got less than 1% of the vote. So again, siphon off some of that vote from New Hampshire, and that one could have flipped. So these states were all pretty close and potentially in the range of actually being flipped, at least in 2016. And then I told you I'd look at the Reform Party. Here is their current website and goes over their platform. I think the biggest things to highlight here are some of their topics of their party. And it says fiscal responsibility. The Reform Party will enforce fiscal responsibility and hold legislative and executive leaders accountable for it at our national, state, and city levels. That's something that conservatives gravitate towards. They want a balanced budget. They want less spending. So again, at least in today's Reform Party, it reflects that reflects more of the Republican Party. Again, trying to make the comparison versus the Ross Perot Party of 92, 96, what potentially would have drawn some of those votes away from Bush and towards Perot. Energy and environmental practices is going to be a big sticking point, and this is not going to be something that Kennedy has on his side with right-leaning independents or kind of moderate Republicans. It says the Reform Party seeks to find and maintain the balance between the United States energy and independence versus the protection and preservation of our natural environment and public spaces. That's a little bit fence city there, but it still talks about energy independence, which is not something that is a platform of the left, and definitely not a platform of Kennedy, at least in terms of him not pushing the green agenda. He's going to push a green agenda. Tax policy. The Reform Party will create and utilize a fair tax policy for both citizens and industry and will allow the country to grow and prosper. Again, very vague. I don't think that really takes one side or the other, but I just highlighted it to kind of point it out. National security. This is where it's definitely more towards the Republican side. The Reform Party will build and enforce policies and programs that best guarantee the security of our national borders, the safety of our citizens from foreign and domestic threats, and the security of America's economic interests. Then the education piece says Reform Party will ensure equal access to all persons seeking to further their knowledge and will create accountability for individuals and institutions that provide education. Again, a little fence city with that, but to me it sounds a little bit more right. The right wing tends to be more for school choice than the left wing. This sounds a little bit more school choicey to me than not. So legislative process and lobbying. This is for sure something this is what the current speaker battle is over right now. The Reform Party will create an amendment requiring single subject bills and addenda considered on the merits within only, and a periodic review of past laws made under the microscope of value to citizenry and its constitutionality. So again, this sounds more right wing than left wing. And the reason I bring this up is because in 1992, 1996, Perot was the Reform Party. I know technically independent in 92, but still Reform Party. This was his platform. He created this Reform Party after his 1992 run. And that certainly, based on today's politics, this is more of a conservative agenda than it is a liberal agenda, although it does sit the fence on a few of the issues. I think that certainly this person or somebody from this party would siphon off more votes from Republicans in today's election than they would Democrats in an election like today. So that's why I point out 92, 96, certainly siphon off more votes, in my opinion, from the Republican than the Democrat based on the party's platform. What could possibly be the outcome if Kennedy wins a state or two states? I don't think there's really any way that he has a path to winning the election, but he potentially could win a state or two or three. It's a possibility, and it has to be treated as such. So I'm looking at the map here. I like this interactive map. It's from 270towin.com. And this is basically the map from the last two election cycles, with the states that are not colored in red or blue being the swing states that went for Trump in 2016 and went for Biden in 2020. So if we assume that all the rest are deep enough blue or deep enough red, which I don't think is even the case, I think that there's a couple of states off the top of my head that I could say would not go that way. So let's just throw those states in there too. So North Carolina, I think, is one of them. And I think Nevada is certainly one of them too. That aren't deep enough red and deep enough blue to automatically be in the camp of the Republican or Democrat should Kennedy come out and perform very well. And New Hampshire is another one of those states too. So I will take New Hampshire and put them on the board. Give me 1 second here. There we go. So I put New Hampshire on the board. The case can be made maybe about Virginia, it being won by Republicans. I mentioned before in some of the statewide elections in 2021. The case can be made potentially about Florida, it being a very close state over the last couple of election cycles. 2022 was a pretty big landslide for the Republicans, so I think that that's more firmly in the Republican side than potentially being up in the air. You can make the argument maybe about Colorado. Minnesota's kind of a goofy state, but I'll leave it at these states here. I'll leave it at the 5 states that went for Biden and in 2020, that went for Trump in 2016, and then the other 3 states that I think are close enough to where Kennedy could take some independent votes enough away from one of the candidates or the other to potentially flip it. So that would leave the Democrats at 22 electoral votes, the Republicans at 222. That would leave Republicans at 219, making a pretty close balance here. Now, if we say we need to get to 270, but we can say some of these states can go for Kennedy. I'm going to go back and put these states in the category or in the on the side of where they won the last 2 elections. Let's say that Nevada, New Hampshire, and North Carolina don't flip, and there's not enough support for Kennedy to win those states. But let's say Georgia, don't want to color it. Let's say Georgia and Arizona stay. Let's give Pennsylvania's pretty blue. It's bluish purple. Say Pennsylvania goes for Biden. Michigan, let's say Michigan goes for Biden. And then let's say Wisconsin goes to Trump. That was one of the closer states too. I realistically should maybe go Arizona, but let's just say that that's where we end up, and we got 266 for Biden, 245 for Trump, and then we got 27. Somehow Kennedy wins 2 states. He's going to win Georgia and Arizona in this make believe scenario. Okay, so what does that mean? That means nobody got 270 electoral votes, which is what is needed to win the election. Ultimately, what would that mean if somebody doesn't get to 270 votes? It goes to the House of Representatives. Now, keep in mind, before the vote to certify the election, the new Congress is sworn in. So the numbers that I'm going to give you today are not going to be the same numbers that potentially would happen in a new Congress. Every 2 years, the entire Congress is up for grabs, and anyone could win balance of the total number of states that are in control by either Democrats or Republicans. So what does that mean in terms of any potential election that doesn't get to 270? It says here, if neither candidate gets the majority of the 538 electoral votes, which is 270, the election for president is decided in the House of Representatives, with each state delegation having 1 vote. Keep that in mind. It's not whoever controls the majority of the House. It's each state gets 1 vote. So, a majority of states, 26, is needed to win. Senators would elect the vice president, with each senator having 1 vote. A majority of senators, 51, is needed to win. So, the Senate elects the vice president. The House elects the president of the United States. Now, I believe it's the top 3 vote getters, regardless of party, would be the people that are that it could potentially be voted for. So, as currently sits, the Republicans have 26 states that they have the majority in. So that state would have to vote as one. I would assume that if there is 5 Republican members of the House and 2 Democrats, they would vote for the Republican, and vice versa. If there was 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans, they would then vote for the Democrat. There's 2 states that are currently tied that have the same amount of delegates from each state, the state of North Carolina and the state of Minnesota. So I don't know how those states would vote. I don't know what the tiebreaker would be, what would be the process there. And then there are 22 states that are currently have more Democrat representatives than Republicans. So if Kennedy were to win, I can't imagine that these states break party lines and don't vote for the candidate from their party. Now they could decide, hey, we're in this state and maybe we have the majority of the seats from this state. Say Democrats have the majority from one state, but that state voted for Donald Trump or the Republican, and they decide to do that. I can't imagine that somebody would do that, but there's nothing saying that they couldn't do that. So that's the scenario that we might be faced with in 2024 if Kennedy were to snag a state or 2 and a couple of states get back into the Republican column. We look at 3 candidates, none of which have reached the 270 threshold to win the Electoral College and be elected president of the United States. So it will be interesting to see. I felt it was necessary to show the last time we had a legitimate third-party candidate, which RFK seems to be, was in 92 and 96. The wrench that threw into the election process, that again, Perot did not win any states, but did change the math for the Republicans and the Democrats in those elections. Both elections, Clinton was the Democrat nominee, and he ultimately won both of those elections. But again, I showed the platform, the current day platform of the Reform Party, a little bit of fence sitting with some of the policy positions, but the other policy positions seem to be right-wing policy positions. So I think that back then, Ross Perot certainly hurt the Republicans more than he hurt the Democrats. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case in 2024 with RFK. Time will tell who RFK helps more and who he hurts more by who's elected president of the United States. But between now and then, I don't think anyone truly knows. I'm leaning towards slightly more it helps Trump or the Republican, but there's certainly some of these states, like I pointed out, North Carolina, that are narrowly red states. Again, I told you about the delegates in those states, and it's 50-50 with representatives in the House of the U.S. House of Representatives currently. And Trump won that state the last two times by anywhere between 1 and I think 2 or 3 points. He won it in 2016, so it's a very close state. It's a state that's potentially a state that could be flipped even without RFK. You pull away some of Trump's support to RFK more so than Biden, Biden could end up winning that state. The same could be true for a state like New Hampshire, a state like Nevada, potentially even some states like Minnesota that I pointed out earlier were very close in 2016 that could go the other way. And you just never know how voters are gonna react, what column they're going to put some moderate Republicans, some moderate Democrats, how they truly feel about RFK. Do they think that this is potentially the right answer for who to vote for? Or are they going to continue to vote along party lines? There's just so much up in the air. No one truly knows. Anyone who's telling you differently is flat out lying to you. I'm just presenting you with my perspective and what we've seen from the last time we had a legitimate third-party candidate in a presidential election. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you've seen here today, and I will see you in the next video.